We'll edit that middle part. All right, so the meaning of mindfulness and nowness. So again, tranquility is the practice of mindfulness, the ability to be present, to be in the present moment through not allowing the mind to become distracted. And again, the way we do that is we have an object of meditation that we come back to, or that we relate to, that we attend to, throughout the practice. He says that this practice of mindfulness should not be understood as a dissociated, suspended state of being in the now. In other words, it's not a state of numbness, and it's not a state of being detached from our experience. Again, whatever arises is fresh, which means it's present in a vivid way, so that it's not a sense of being detached from our experience. But rather, it refers to a state of being aware without distraction by thoughts. And he says that this happens by not forgetting to stay with the object of meditation. In other words, we remember the object, we remember what we're doing. And he says that it might be surprising to know that the opposite of mindfulness is forgetfulness. We've heard this before. When Trungpa Rinpoche presents the obstacles to meditation, again in the path of individual liberation, the second obstacle to meditation practice is forgetfulness. The first, by the way, is laziness, which is not practicing at all. But Trollig's point is that there's too much emphasis on the sense of now, that this may take away from some appreciation of the role of memory, of remembering the object, remembering to come back in shamatha practice. He then begins with some discussion about the nature of thoughts altogether, and points out that all our thoughts and emotions are based on past impressions, and our present emotions and thoughts are invariably colored by our past impressions. And he says when Buddhist literature mentions not dwelling on the past or anticipating the future, it's saying we should not lose awareness of the fact that these thoughts about the past and future are simply arising in the mind right now. In other words, we're aware that we're aware. We're aware that we're experiencing those thoughts, but it's not that we're trying to extinguish, push away, or repress those thoughts in any way. That in fact, experiencing these thoughts with awareness is mindfulness, is being in the now. And if we lose awareness, then we are swept away. But as long as we understand, if we believe that being in the now is understood as some kind of non-conceptual presence of mind, we're going to become frustrated, because we're going to feel that we need to create a state of mind, and we're going to find that that's difficult to do because thoughts are always there. And when that happens, our practice becomes goal-oriented. And the point that with shamatha is maintaining awareness through attention to the object of meditation. He says further, as we settle in the practice, we'll become more aware of our emotions and thoughts, and we'll see that they mostly do relate to past and future. And sometimes this can be even the very subtle future of what we want to have happen in the next moment, or the very subtle past of what we might have experienced in the previous moment that we'd like to hang on to. But more and more we become aware of our confusion about past, present, and future. In any case, he says, how do we know we're in tranquility meditation? How do we know we're experiencing shamatha? And he says it's simply the ability to be cognizant or self-reflexively aware of mental states we're experiencing. So again, it's not that we're trying to achieve an absence of thought or any kind of blankness of experience. It's that we're resting in a state of awareness. We're resting in a state of awareness, and we are aware of thoughts as they arise, but we're not engaging with them. We're not rejecting them. He elaborates further on this by talking about discursive thoughts, where he says the tendency to dwell on the past, anticipate the future, and discriminate between types of thoughts we experience are collectively known as discursive thoughts. When he talks about discriminating between types of thoughts, that's what happens when we pick and choose things that we experience. We decide some things are good and some things are bad, some things we want to hold on to, some things we want to push away. And then we try to strategize and control our experience. And when we do that, the mind will not settle. The mind will be in conflict because we're trying to achieve something other than simply allowing ourselves to be just as we are. He says that discursive thoughts are based on binary concepts at a fundamental level. And with this, it's helpful to remember what he said earlier in the book, that basically conceptual mind works by exclusion, that something is or is not this, that, or the other thing. And this leads to all kinds of issues with either or thinking, particularly if we're not aware of the rigidity of some of our concepts. But the main idea of conceptual mind that he's talking about here are the notions that things either exist, they don't exist, both do and don't exist, or neither exist nor not exist, which are the four extreme views in Madhyamaka that Madhyamaka refutes in the Madhyamaka teachings. But and he says that the fixed idea that we have the strongest attachment to is seeing ourselves and others as separate, seeing subject and object as existing entities. In other words, as discrete, independent, fixed things. And with that, he says, we can see right away that discursive thoughts, the conceptual mind, prevents us from realizing the true nature of things, for the simple reason that in reality, everything exists in relationship. Everything arises in dependence on something else. So when we're able to recognize things in that way, we can see that nothing has an independent existence, that our fixed ideas about things are mental imputations, things we impose upon the things that we perceive. And as we become more aware of discursive thoughts in meditation practice, through mindfulness practice in particular, he says we attach less and less value to them by interpreting them as good or bad. The way that people sometimes talk about this is we begin to see the transparency of thought. We see how something's a big deal to us in one moment, and then at another point in time doesn't matter to us at all. Or we see how we work ourselves up with anticipation, either in a really good or a really negative way, and then find that something that is completely different from what we expected to begin with. So we begin more and more to realize that we ascribe a reality to our thoughts that really isn't there. And this becomes most obvious with the thoughts that are the most mistaken. But we begin to realize that, in fact, that's the nature of all our thoughts. And we see, even for ourselves, how our states of mind change from moment to moment. We begin our meditation practice with the intention of focusing on the object. And 5 minutes later, we're working our household budget, or we're thinking about what we have to do tomorrow, or something we regretted yesterday. So where did that person go? More and more, we come to see that our sense of the fixed reality of things is illusory, or that there's a transparency to thought. And this becomes increasingly clear as we settle in shamatha practice, because we're less distracted. We're not jumping from one thing to another thing to another thing in quite as mindless a way. So his point is that we should try to enter into, rather than create, a state of mental equilibrium. And that when we start thinking of things in terms of good or bad, that this leads to agitation in the mind. So the meditation instruction that he gives is, no matter what thought presents itself to us, we simply notice it and let it be. We should neither encourage, dwell upon, nor try to get rid of thoughts, but simply regard them as just thoughts. And he says this is the same as the Buddhist notion of letting go or not elaborating on thoughts. And that to judge thoughts as good or bad is merely to generate more discursive thinking. So again, as we settle in shamatha, the nature of our experience of thought becomes clearer and clearer to us. And we begin to be able to let go, as opposed to finding the things that we imagine to be true so compelling, so driving. So that's shamatha practice in the Hinayana sense. he then begins talking about the Mahamudra view of discursive thoughts, which in some ways is similar, except in the biggest difference is that in the Mahamudra practice, thoughts are not in any way seen as an enemy or as anathema, as he puts it. As a matter of fact, the instruction is thoughts are your friend, but that comes later. But at this point, the point is that in Mahamudra, he says we simply observe how thoughts arise, how they persist, and how they dissipate. And I think the emphasis there is on the word how, not why thoughts arise or why thoughts persist or why they dissipate, but how they come to be. Where do they come from? And when we're experiencing a thought, where is it? And where it goes, when it vanishes, where does it go? How does it go? And some of this really becomes more clear. This is actually more what's involved in Mahamudra Vipassana, or insight practice, where we begin to see the real insubstantiality of thinking. But the point is, we're not trying to eradicate negative thoughts, and we're not trying to cultivate positive thoughts in Mahamudra meditation. Whatever thought arises, we just see it as it is, without elaborating, without judging, without analyzing, without appending any kind of sense of good or bad to it. And he says this is called the practice of non-acceptance and non-rejection. So we're not accepting the thought, we're not rejecting the thought. We're just seeing it as, in a sense, one more perception, you could say. He says that Mahamudra regards shamatha as a way of settling discursive thoughts rather than eliminating them altogether. That it's really important in Mahamudra practice that there's no attempt to remove thoughts or experiences of negative emotions. And he points out that this is a radical view, that in the Hinayana in particular and in the Mahayana schools of Buddhism, with the notion of karma, that the notion of karma is that negative thoughts and feelings lead to negative emotions, which lead to negative actions, and from there, negative consequences, and that this further conditions the mind to further negativity. And that what we try to do in the Hinayana and Mahayana is abandon, let go of negative thoughts and emotions, and we try to cultivate positive thoughts and emotions. But with Mahamudra, it's different in terms of Mahamudra meditation, that their thoughts are not seen as good or bad. They're just seen as purely the expression of mind. And he says that, but he makes some very clear distinctions here. With the Mahamudra teachings, he says we have to view the karmic process exactly in the way that the Hinayana Mahayana does in everyday activity. So the idea is not that anything we do, this does not mean that anything we do is not good or bad, that in fact negative actions lead to negative results. What we're talking about in terms of not seeing thoughts as good or bad and not trying to cultivate good thoughts, not trying to reject bad thoughts, that applies particularly to the practice of meditation. As he says, it's really important to be clear what we're doing, that it's important not to confuse different meditation techniques in different contexts for meditation. So when we're actually practicing Mahamudra meditation practice, it's different because, as he says, we're concerned with contemplation, not action. That in meditation, we resist the temptation, or he calls it the imperative, to privilege or try to cultivate wholesome and positive thoughts, and to attempt to abandon negative thoughts. That what we're doing in Mahamudra Shamatha in particular is we're trying to reduce the proliferation of mental activities and attain a state of tranquility or clarity. And for that reason, we don't regard some thoughts as good and some as bad. When we do that, then we enter into struggle with ourselves, struggle with our experience, and this obscures mind. It just leads to more of the same kind of struggle that we conventionally get into on an ego basis all the time anyway. But again, he makes it really clear. This is in the context of meditation, not in the context of everyday life. And he points out that, as we've talked about, that there are complementary practices, and we've learned these through this text, that the four reminders, the precious human birth, the reality, impermanence, and then death, truth about karma, and the unsatisfactory nature of samsara, that we do practice those in order to generate motivation and enthusiasm and joy in our practice. And we do work with the four immeasurables to cultivate positive mental states such as loving kindness and compassion when we're doing those meditations. But in Mahamudra, when we practice Mahamudra, particularly Mahamudra Shamatha, we treat all thoughts as the same in order to gain sufficient distance and detachment from our current mental state that will allow us to ease naturally into a state of tranquility without effort or contrivance. And the word natural or naturally is used quite a bit in the Mahamudra literature, because the idea is when we are able to settle, when we're actually able to simply be with our experience just as it is, without trying to change anything, without trying to judge anything, that the nature of mind does become evident to us, or can become evident to us, because we're not caught up, we're not distracted, and it's not so veiled by our confusion. So that's what I came prepared to speak about tonight. I don't know if John has returned, or well, turn it over to him if he did. I should actually switch.
I have returned. I'm sorry, my computer died.
Oh, okay. All right, good.
I'm back.
Could I ask a question on, a question on what Michael just described?
Yes, who is this?
Excuse me?
Who's speaking? Oh, there it is, Ed.
I'm sorry, this is Ed Papantonio. Would that be appropriate now, or would you rather do it after you? Yeah, okay. So again, Michael, thank you for your really wonderful presentation. When we study the Noble Eightfold Path, one of the steps is what's translated as right mindfulness, which seems kind of similar to what you're talking about. And the words that is translated from are smriti in Sanskrit and trengpa in Tibetan. And I think John might have put us onto this at some point in one of his earlier discussions. How is that concept related to what you're talking about tonight? I think the way I've understood it is much more, if you will, earlier in an earlier way of thinking, in a more basic way of thinking. But the way you're describing it tonight is kind of a step farther. Is that correct? Or I'd appreciate your comments on that, and anyone's comments.
Mahamudra Shamatha has a lot of similarity to mindfulness meditation as it would be understood in the Hinayana. The biggest difference, I think, is what Traleg is trying to get across with the idea that in the Hinayana, we are trying to abandon the kleshas. The idea by the time someone is practicing Mahamudra is there has been some basic taming of the mind. And in fact, rather than viewing kleshas as something to get rid of, they're just one more experience that we have that we are open to. It doesn't mean we act on them. It doesn't mean we engage or elaborate on them, but they're one more thing that we become aware of and that we allow ourselves to experience. Smriti, I believe, is usually translated as recollection. And again, it's similar to that idea of not forgetting the object, coming back to the object. Trengpa's, I think, usually translated as placement. Traleg uses the word anchor, but it's the same idea that we put our attention on something, the breath, a visual object, whatever it is that we're working with, and we keep that in mind. We remember that. And when we become completely distracted, that's what we, again, return to, place our attention on. So that in that way, whether it's a visual object or whether it's the breath, we're coming back to a state of awareness, a state of being present, you could say. So does that help?
Yes, thank you again.
Yeah, he talks about the importance of remembering that you're lost in thought. When we're lost in thought, often we don't remember. We don't know. We're just thinking. And so part of meditation practice is to develop the capacity to remember oh, I'm thinking, I need to come back to the object of meditation, that remembering. So that's part of it here. So this next section is mindfulness of mental states. And the idea is that having become accustomed to using the breath as an aid to establishing mindfulness as an anchor, we can take a further step and turn our attention to our inner mental states as the focus of meditation, and move on to the breath as our focus, and then apply mindfulness to the very cognitive and affective mental states that fixate on the past and future, he says. So we're beginning to notice these mental states that come and go. He says, first, we have to acknowledge and we have to recognize and accept that as human beings, we're thinking creatures, and that we attach values to things and to our thoughts, good and bad, happy and sad. But in order for the mind to settle, we need to suspend value judgments that we impose on our mental activities as being positive or negative, unwholesome. Basically, this involves not getting bogged down by the twin afflictions of hope and fear. Instead, we just develop simple awareness. We come back from dreaming, which always involves hope and fear, good and bad, to complete awareness of what's going on in our minds. To this end, he says it is essential that we not try to create a state of tranquility, but we allow the mind to enter into tranquility naturally. That's so important here. This is Mahamudra meditation. We are not trying to fix our minds with a great effort on an object. Rather, we're trying to allow the mind to rest in awareness of whatever it may be, the breath, that statue in front of us, that rock, as Michael put it. This is an important Mahamudra teaching. It's called non-doing. It's also a great part of the Great Perfection teachings, non-doing. They say that one of the main Great Perfection practices is called cutting through. Cutting through to what? Well, the phrase is cutting through to original purity, which means basically cutting through thought of any kind to simple awareness of this, what's going on now. And that in doing this, it's completely non-doing, what he's calling non-doing. And they say that this is the lazy person's path to enlightenment. Isn't that terrific? All we have to do is stop doing so much and come back to simple, the awareness that's already here. We come back to this non-doing. He says we do not do tranquility meditation. We allow tranquility meditation to arise of its own accord. That means we just come back to this awareness that is already here, the awareness of the breath going out, dissolving, and here we are. And it will do so, this tranquility will arise of its own accord, only if we stop thinking of the meditative state as a thing we need to do actively. This is the whole thrust of this chapter, that we can give up that tremendous emphasis on effort to do it right, and instead allow ourselves to basically float into this tranquility meditation. He likens it to snowflakes falling and settling on the ground. According to Buddhism, all our experiences, pain, unhappiness, anguish, suffering, and torment, have their origin in the dual tendencies of the human mind, namely wanting things to be otherwise. And this makes us swing back and forth between hope and fear in life in general and in our spiritual practices. This is what needs to be given up. So in the Mahamudra teachings, there is the constant emphasis on avoiding hope and fear in meditation, endeavoring to rise above these two activities. Usually we hope that everything goes well, or we're plagued by self-doubt. I can't do it, I don't understand it, I don't know about it. And we fear that nothing will go well. The practice is to constantly return to the object of meditation, whatever it may be, thoughts. You can do that on thoughts. You can constantly return to the breath Whenever distraction occurs, just return to the current state of mind where there is no hope and no fear, just like this, right now. You're aware of your computer screen of this image of, for better or for worse, me on it. It takes no effort. It's just there. He says there's no wishing for certain meditative experiences to arise and that you don't dread the appearance of others. If hope and fear does arise, do not regard that as an obstacle or failing. Then you've done it again. Instead, he says, simply be aware of it without thinking that it is a good or a bad thing. Again and again, we're told, don't judge yourself. Don't try to perfect your practice. That's just more of the same, more of the self-torture, more of effort and judgment. What counts is not the ability to prevent thoughts or emotions from arising, but the ability to catch ourselves in a particular mental or emotional state. This is the very essence of tranquility meditation. And then he quotes a teacher named Gotsangpa, who says, when a disturbing thought arises in the mind, could be any thought really, simply focus the mind on that thought and rest in that state instead of reacting to it. The thought will then be liberated of its own natural accord. It'll just go poof, just dissolve. I'll read it again. When a disturbing thought arises in the mind, could be any thought. All thoughts are fundamentally disturbing one way or the other. Simply focus the mind on that thought and rest in that state instead of reacting to it. The thought will then be liberated of its own natural accord. And then he goes into a section on the obstacles to meditation and their antidotes. And in the normal approach to shamatha, if you're really working on shamatha, there is a description of the 9 levels of shamatha and the 4 states of concentration, which are generally regarded as God realms. Meditation on not this, not that, meditation on space, and 2 others. And he's saying Mahamudra doesn't involve this, either one of these. In the Mahamudra approach, these accomplishments of the dhyana states, they're called, or in the Pali, the jhana states, these states of concentration, are not real indicators of progress on the path, and we don't need to be concerned about them. And then this, the sole purpose of tranquility meditation, of shamatha, in the Mahamudra sense, unlike its place in Hinduism, by the way, is to create a favorable mental condition for the practice of insight meditation, vipassana. It is only insight meditation that enables us to transcend our deluded states of mind and attain wisdom consciousness. So the basic purpose of tranquility meditation is to give us the favorable mental condition, the foundation, the peace, as it were, the ability to be or rest in the present moment. And this is the foundation for insight meditation, which we then will be learning about in the future. And that is what enables us to achieve awakening, enlightenment, wisdom consciousness. The dhyanas, the states of concentration that are recommended in the Hindu tradition and also in some Buddhist traditions, can hinder our practice by leading to trance states, whereas it is considered imperative that we heighten our sensory awareness rather than diminish it if we are to practice insight meditation effectively. You see, the states of concentration where you concentrate one pointedly on an object, basically you're turning off your senses. You're turning off your awareness of anything around you. You're fixating one pointedly on whatever it may be. And this is anathema to insight meditation, to vipassana. He says in the lower teachings, and by this he means the Mahayana and Hinayana, the exoteric path, We need to tame the wild elephant of our mind with the rope of mindfulness and the hook of awareness. And then he reads that passage, I don't have it in front of me, that Shanti Deva gave. I've lost my book now. Sorry. It was a wonderful passage. Somebody, you can all read it. It's there.
I have it here.
Go ahead, read it.
As the elephant of the mind wanders, it should be bound with a rope of mindfulness, tied to the post of mental image, and tamed with a hook of awareness.
Mm-hmm. And this is a very Hinayana Mahayana approach. In the Vajrayana, in Mahamudra, we are not doing that. We are not tying down the mind, binding it. Rather, what we're doing is releasing it, relaxing into awareness of this and that, whatever appears in the mind. And as we relax, all of that dissolves. He says, in the Mahamudra context, we only need to concern ourselves with two categories of obstacles: mental agitation and mental stupor or drowsiness. And the two antidotes for these two are mindfulness and awareness, the only tools we need to become skilled in the Mahamudra tradition. Mindfulness, meaning we remember that we're dreaming and we come back, and awareness of what we come back to. And as we sit in shamatha, tranquility meditation, what we're coming back to is anything that is arising as well as the object of our meditation. And then he says, though initially it might seem that mental agitation is the most difficult obstacle to overcome, actually it is drowsiness the drowsiness and stupor that are most difficult, because they elude detection more easily than agitation. He says drowsiness can even present itself as calmness and be mistaken for the stability of tranquility meditation. But it would not have the real attributes of tranquility meditation, which are mindfulness and mental perspicacity. You're mindful of whatever is going on in the present, and you're perspicacious. You see it clearly. Tranquility is the quintessential opposite of the excited state of mind, but it is not a state of dullness. And then this is so important here. He says, we don't have to be unduly concerned with the alternating periods of excitation and dullness which occur in our daily meditation practice. The key to tranquility meditation involves the ability to notice things, not eliminate them from our consciousness. It's all about awareness, not elimination or perfection of some kind. As the capacity to be attentive, conscious, and aware develops in the meditative situation, it will also begin to flow into our everyday lives as well. So as we begin to it's so gentle, it's so allowing, this approach to meditation. And this will flow into our everyday lives as well. And then he talks about tranquility meditation with an object. There are two main approaches. Tonight, we're going to talk about tranquility meditation with an object, and next week, we'll be talking about it without an object. With attributes and tranquility meditation without attributes. With an object involves using specific objects, as we've discussed, such as a Buddhist statue or the breath, to anchor our concentration. Without an object does not involve any object of concentration other than the mind itself, and we'll be dealing with this next week. We should give up expectations about what we might experience in meditation. Wow. Giving up expectations about what we might experience. When we have expectations, we judge ourselves. Am I doing it right? Am I doing it wrong? And that's more thought. And that's a really nasty thought. That's really harsh. We're hard on ourselves. And that is all given up. Tranquility with an object is meant to assist in stabilizing our mind. At first, the stabilization will be rudimentary, crude. Then our awareness of how agitated our mind is begins to increase. We begin to notice. You remember Organ Chowan in that book on Rigpa, and he talks about the three virtues of shamatha, of this. The first is you begin to realize how much you think. The second is you begin to develop the ability to know that you're lost in thought and come back. That's what Trolloc is calling remembrance. And the third is that you get a rest, which is what tranquility meditation provides, a rest from the effort and unhappiness of neurotic mind. So he says, we might even think incorrectly that our agitation is increasing, but we are just becoming more aware of it. So we're counseled to become aware of our thoughts. And we don't regard disturbing thoughts and emotions as something that upsets our meditation. Listen to that. We don't regard disturbing thoughts and emotions as something that upsets our meditation, but we allow them to arise, become aware of them. This is the practice of meditation. And then let them go. And they do go. They just disappear. Not commenting or ruminating about our mental process. Every time. From the point of view of Mahamudra, the criterion by which we judge whether we are meditating or not is not whether we are exercising control of our minds, but is whether awareness is present. Awareness is far more important than controlling the mind. In fact, forget about controlling the mind. Just come back to awareness without self-judgment. That is one of the biggest evils, is judging oneself. Oh, I'm a terrible meditator. Oh, I was lost again. Oh, I haven't been aware for the last half hour. Let it go and see it just as another thought. Awareness is the key, not perfection. We must learn to relax the mind every time we employ a meditation object, for it is important not to analyze the object of meditation, but simply to use it to anchor the mind. Many people think that meditation is learning how to control the mind instead of relaxing it. But if we try to control the mind, it will only become claustrophobic, and our agitation will increase. We will experience a state of a mind that is anathema to relaxation. And then he gives the analogy of the silkworm who spins this silk, which is the analogous to thought, and just becomes completely encased in it and dies, and encased in this cocoon of silk. That's analogous to us and our efforts to become great meditators. The principal technique of tranquility with attributes is known as resting the mind. Gosh, could he say it more often? In the Mahamudra teachings, we are counseled to employ 3 techniques of resting the mind in tranquility meditation. And they're all really the same. The first one is resting the mind naturally. This will prevent the mind from straying from the object of meditation. We just relax into that object of meditation. It could be a physical object, it could be the breath, it could be mental states. The main point of the technique, an utterly relaxed resting of the mind. And the image he gives again is of snow falling gently onto rocks and settling easily onto the ground. Then the second one of these 3 is really, they're all the same, is resting the mind in a relaxed fashion. We allow the mind to enter effortlessly into a state of rest. It's so simple. We just let it go into this state of rest, whatever it may be. If you have expectations about what meditation should be, you will try to create a state that matches those expectations, and meditation will seem difficult and frustrating. The notion of effortless means not striving to attain any special kind of meditative state. We just relax into this awareness. We have to let go of the tension that binds the mind as a result of being too eager in our practice. And it's like cutting a cord that binds a bundle of wheat so that the wheat just falls effortlessly to the ground. That's the whole thing of relaxing. Finally, the third is resting the mind in its natural state. And if we don't interfere with or contrive the flow of our discursive thoughts, they will dissipate by themselves into our natural state of being, awareness, Buddha nature. We lost in thought. You're thinking. Oh, what am I going to have for lunch? Oh, that person shouldn't have said this to me. Oh, I hope I see so and so. And then suddenly we realize, I'm thinking. And at that point, you let it go and you come back, and here you are for however long. It might be an instant, it might be longer. If we don't interfere with or contrive the flow of discursive thoughts, they will dissipate by themselves into our natural state of being, or Buddha nature. They just dissolve, fall apart like that bundle of wheat. Don't try to create a state of mind completely different from one's normal states of mind. It is not a matter of creating some altered state of consciousness. Isn't that amazing? We're not creating some particular kind of state of consciousness. We're falling apart like that bundle of wheat into our natural, open state of consciousness. In this, more than anything else, it is this more than anything else that's trying, that impedes our ability to be in the present. We must cultivate the understanding that meditation is about dealing with our current state of mind right from the beginning. We must cultivate that right from the beginning. Even if discursive thoughts surge up in our minds, we simply allow them to fall back into the natural state of the mind. It's so gentle. It's so nonviolent. And the images of waves crashing back into the stillness of the ocean. And that's the end of this chapter. What a terrific injunction to all of us to relax so we can have a discussion. And Barry and Michael, I'll rely on you to call on people because I'm on my iPad and can't see who's talking.
Well, Ed has his hand raised.
Yes, is he saying in resting the mind in its natural state, in the first sentence, is he saying it's the whole thing is a two-step process? If you don't contrive, you automatically or naturally will fall into enlightenment. Is that it?
Not yet.
Not yet. Okay.
Which,
There's more. Okay.
What we're doing is we're creating the foundation for insight meditation. This is this shamatha, this non-violent, non-effortful approach to awareness is the very foundation of insight. Now we have to develop insight into the nature of reality, which comes with vipassana. Would you say, Michael?
Yeah, I think Vipassana is a lot with recognition and stabilization and, complete identification or switch of allegiance. It's developing a real confidence in what we begin to see.
And insight, I think. Insight into a different understanding of reality that comes along. That's described, in the teachings, beginning with the Mahayana, or even in the Hinayana, as egolessness, shunyata, and so forth. It's Vipassana that gives us that, not shamatha. Shamatha is foundational.
Mark has a question.
It's not really questions to comment. Anam Thumpton again, talking about Tumton. I don't pronounce it right, but talking about discursive thoughts and how I think this is all about giving ourselves a break so that, because normally we don't want to fight these things because otherwise they'll never leave. And he talks about it like uninvited dinner guests. Invite them into the house and feed them and give them everything they want, and soon they'll get bored and leave on their own. Anyway, that's it.
Judith?
I'm just rolling in waves of relief. This is the how-to for me. This is the best news yet. I'm just wowed. I mean, all the other approaches, I'm sure, mean the same thing, but for me, this was just like permission and how to. I thought it was just sensational. Thank you. Thank you for putting us on to this Mahamudra. It's just the message really gets to me. I'm thrilled. Whoa. Just what I needed anyway. Holy mackerel.
Is, and a lot of Mahamudra instruction and commentary is all what not to do. Don't do, and that's why, because all we have to do is just really relax and just let things be as
just don't bother. Just a way to stop the efforting.
Mm-hmm.
And with such permission, wow. Just sensational.
Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you, Judith. You really bring it home. It's true.
Woo!
An amazing path, huh?
Amazing. Amazing.
Yeah.
All that effort for nothing.
It got you here. It wasn't for nothing. It got you here.
Oh, God. Thank you guys for putting this book in. Woo!
Val?
Yeah, thank you. I just I want to apologize for coming late, but these last few minutes are like unlocking it. I had a 9-mile detour because of a semi truck.
Oh.
The road, halfway up the road. And this blows me away. I totally ditto everything Judith just said. And sometimes when I am so frustrated and I can't seem to break through because I'm grasping so hard, I say to myself, sometimes to other people who are around, they say, I'm trying. I'm very trying. And it's like, that doesn't work. So if I let go of trying, it's so free. But that part of the chapter about the discursive thoughts, I got to read that closely. Thank you.
Robert?
Thanks. So I share Judith's emotion without the charisma behind the emotion of, to essentially say, wow, dude, that was pretty cool. And thank you for that revelatory reading and your contextualization of what's been read. It makes it so much clearer, both of you. Thank you. So as I was reading this, I was seeing passages such as, in traditional meditation, we do X, but in Mahamudra meditation, we do Y. And I was trying to harmonize what I was reading here to things that I've either read or heard about Buddhism outside of our path of awakening sphere. And is the Mahamudra teaching one path that's obviously within the broader practice of Buddhism, but there are other schools that do it another way? I guess it would just help me to think of, is this a technique that some people that practice follow? That is perhaps, I don't want to say in conflict, but has a different philosophy of others, where you cultivate, say, positive thoughts versus the neither cultivation or rejection of any thought. So I was just curious if there was sort of if you could put that in that kind of broader context of what we're learning when we do about Mahamudra meditation. I don't know if that's obtuse enough, but anything you can do, I appreciate.
Michael?
Well, I think we do all of it. I mean, that's why he presented things like the four immeasurables when he did that. It said that the development of compassion is a very important step. But Mahamudra is the most direct. That Mahamudra and Ati, they're very similar, are the most direct because they go right to the nature of mind. The question is how much we need to, that's what, with Path Mahamudra, what do we need to do in order to be able to realize that? If we're able in meditation practice to simply let go and just allow ourselves to be just as we are, it's, the nature of mind becomes evident. But what most of us find, certainly my experience, is very fleeting, and that all of the practices are helpful. But I think the most important thing to keep in mind is what he said about the knowing what we're doing in terms of the context of different meditation practices. That when we're actually practicing Mahamudra, that we're not doing any kind of judgment about whatever we're experiencing. We're just simply being aware of it all. And that any kind of judgment, any kind of effort obscures and creates agitation in the mind. But that doesn't mean we don't do a practice like Tonglen or even just basic shamatha in order to settle the mind when, we're agitated. So it's all of it, I guess. I guess that's what I'm saying in a roundabout way.
It's the right tool for the right context, really.
Yes. And knowing what context we're practicing in.
Yeah.
Yes. He says that's very important. One of the things, by the way, that was really helpful to me when I first started studying Mahamudra was really understanding the nature of dullness as an obstacle. That and this comes up again and again in Mahamudra teachings. That the mistake we make. The mistake we make is mistaking dullness for non-conceptuality. And really when we're really in our experience, what we experience, he calls it perspicacity. Gampopa calls it vibrant clarity. That's what it means to be present. And that when we're in a state of dullness, it's not a true non-conceptuality. And in fact, mistaking dullness for non-conceptuality can really be an obstacle to our practice. Or another way to say it is whatever arises is fresh. If things are fresh, they're not dull. They're not, just, yeah. John, you're muted.
Sorry, I'm having computer problems here. But Hope they're done now. Anyone else?
Sure.
Yeah, I have a question. Today I was paying attention to a much lighter touch with negative thoughts, realizing a tendency to suppress them, resentment or aggression, and tried a little bit of a lighter touch. And I mean, that's part of what you're talking about, right? It is, thoughts come as they will. They're all kind of created equally in terms of just noticing them, including the ugly, the negative thoughts, the aggressive thoughts that go through our head, right? I mean, maybe in particular, to notice them is the best remedy in a sense.
There doesn't have to be a remedy.
It's just noticing.
Yeah, just noticing. I mean, it's a matter of whether we're caught in them, just like thinking, and somebody could call your name and you might not even notice it, or whether you recognize it and then you're back. But don't beat yourself up for so-called negative thoughts, because that's another one. It's circular. It goes on and on like that.
Yeah, there was a lot of value in not shunning or pushing away or grasping and feeling guilty, rather really just observing. It was helpful. It really was. And they do dissolve.
Yep.
But it's almost like it's a force of habit to latch on to them, feel like you have to do something about them, when in fact the opposite is true. It's just noticing and letting go. They take care of themselves.
Exactly. Yeah. It's amazing. We do less and less. A lazy person's path to enlightenment. It's because it's already here. It's like that last chapter on Buddha nature. It's already here. We just are coming home. Isn't that an amazing phrase? That we're coming home. It's so beautiful.
Yeah, I really like this sentence. He said, when Buddhist literature mentions not dwelling on the past or anticipating the future, it's saying we should not lose awareness of the fact that these thoughts are simply arising in the mind right now. We just stay in this state of awareness. Barry?
Yeah, I just had this thought that it's kind of like the nature of thoughts is they arise and change and fade away, and that's just what thoughts do until we latch onto them. And then something else happens. So what this is about is really just letting them be the way they naturally are. They come, they go, they change. So I just had that. It's almost like have more respect for it or something. If you leave a thought alone, it'll come, it'll change, it'll fade.
It'll turn into the great symbol, Mahamudra. We'll begin to understand Tantra and the Vajrayana.
You can also begin to understand impermanence.
And a huge celebration of life, huge valuation of this life that's contained in all this.
We're all treading this path together. And alone. That phrase, alone together. Well, anyone, if we have no further comments, we could do the closing chants. Okay. Mary, could we talk about, my computer died, so I don't know what's happening to the recording. We should talk after we close.
Okay, I'm recording from the point where your computer died, and I'm going to send that to you.
Great, thanks. Because I've got the recording for the first part. I'll put them together on the web. All right, everybody. Somebody have the chance to put up? If not, I can do it. Just take me a second. I think. Nope.
So, but who's reciting them?
I'll go ahead and recite them. I cannot put them up, however.
All right, they'll put them up then.
Thanks.
I can do it. Here we go.
I've got it right here.
Okay, you do it.
Okay. Got it right here.
We will end with the prayer for peace and by dedicating the merit generated through our practice to the benefit of all sentient beings. By the blessings of enlightened and compassionate ones, by the power of my positive actions of 3 times, and my prayers of pure aspiration, may wars, conflicts, epidemics, and all other maladies dissolve in this world, and may the earth and all who live on this earth enjoy the abundance of well-being. May all learn to live lovingly with each other. By this merit may all obtain omniscience. May it defeat the enemy wrongdoing. From the stormy waves of birth, old age, sickness, and death, from the ocean of samsara, may I free all beings. By the confidence of the golden sun of the great East, may the lotus garden of the Rigden's wisdom bloom. May the dark ignorance of sentient beings be dispelled. May all beings enjoy profound, brilliant glory.
Thanks, Philip. Thanks, everybody.